Today you're about to see one of the biggest turnarounds in the history of chess, and this motif happens exactly once per century. I'm Grandmaster Igor Smirnov, and let's explore this together. So the first game we're going to explore was played around 100 years ago between Lasker playing white, who was the second world chess champ, against Lohmann, more or less an unknown opponent. In fact, it's been a simul played by Lasker on 20 boards, and this is one of those games. Now let's look at the position which is the most intriguing and the most thrilling out of it. So first of all, what do we see here? Well, the black's king is exposed and white is setting up something along the f-file. The pawn is ready to capture here. By the way, it is white to play. And in addition to that, white is up in exchange. They're having a rook against the knight. Oh no, it should be easily winning for white. Probably there are a number of ways for white to win this. You may in fact even try to pause the video and find a winning combination. It's, I would say, in an intermediate level combination, and it's possible to find it. But Lasker decided to finish the game in style. And what he did is he first sacrificed his rook over there on c2. And after black captured it, white traded here on c2. At first it's unclear why would white give up his material for nothing, but then there is rook f8, another beautiful sacrifice, and it turns out that that was the point. After king accepts it, the white pawn sneaks into the h zone to the 7th rank, and there is no way for black to stop pawn from being promoted on the next move. Now Lasker was probably proud of himself, expecting black to resign and to add one more beautiful game to the arsenal of Lasker. But black just played rook c1 check, okay, white played king f2, black played rook c2 check, and Lasker was probably annoyed, thinking, oh, come on dude, just resign, this is just a couple checks, the king will run away within a couple moves. So he played king g3, rook c3, king g4, rook c4, black keeps giving checks, king comes here to g5, and that's the moment where Lasker probably expected black to stop the clock and to shake hands, but all of a sudden there is rook h4, boom. A really big and unexpected turnaround. Black is sacrificing the rook here on h4. Now, what's the point? Well, it turns out that if white captures, and white is forced to capture, or else the rook will simply capture the pawn over there. So when white captures the pawn, all of a sudden there is pawn g5, check to the king, and now whatever white does on the next move, black is gonna play king g7 and stop this pawn from being promoted. That's the trick that black exploited here, and it's really fascinating because after king to g5 and king to g7, in fact Lasker just resigned because this pawn on h7 is going to be captured on the next move, and then black will simply promote his passed pawns on the queen side because there is no way for white to stop this mass of black's pawns on the queen side. So Lasker just resigned, and it's quite unexpected and I guess annoying when he was just trying to finish the game style, but it turned around to be exactly the opposite. By the way, coming back a couple moves, white still could win this game if he's just a bit more careful, and instead of moving the king over there, which is natural because white is trying to naturally to protect his pawns of the king side, but instead white should have just avoided that to not give black this nasty rook lift to the king side to prevent this. And to prevent this maneuver, white just needs to move his king towards the rook. And in that case, the checks are indeed over, and on the next move the pawn will be promoted and white would win. So that would justify the white's combination. So I guess Lasker just relaxed too early, but indeed we can say that the black's combination was truly unexpected. Suddenly, that's not the end of the story. As I've told you previously, this motif seemed to happen once in a century, and this game happened around 100 years later compared to the previous game of Lasker that we just analyzed. This is the game played between Garry Kasparov playing white against Timman, another really strong grandmaster. It was black to play, and we can see in endgame position the material is equal, but the white's pawns off the queen side are really dangerous, they're ready to be pushed forward, while the black's pawns over here are already blockaded by the white's king, so it's much harder for black to move them somehow, and for that reason black's position seems to be really dangerous, probably losing. But black tried to pull off an interesting trick. He played pawn c4. Trying to kind of trade pawns a little bit, so that if white captures this pawn by the rook, black would capture that pawn over there on b5 by the rook. And usually when you're trying to defend in an endgame, it's good to trade pawns and simplify a position, trying to reach a draw. And indeed black would have some drawish chances there. But what if white captures by the king, and not only winning the pawn but also attacking the rook and defending their own pawn on b5? In that case, Timman prepared a trick which he thought would help him to win the game. It's the move pawn to d3. Black is sacrificing the rook over there on d5, but instead their pawn is rushing to the square of promotion. and there is nothing white can do really. If white captures the rook or anything else, the pawn comes forward to d2, and it looks like white is in a big trouble, because in the next move the pawn will be promoted, and it will also deliver a check to the white king over there on d5, and white also cannot stop it, because if they play rook c1, the pawn will simply capture the rook. So black probably thought that he's actually winning the game, and now it's your task to try to find the solution for white, the move that Kasparov played. And if you can't find it, please write it down in the comments below. And also, this is going to be a really useful lesson, because you only need to wait for about 100 years to repeat the same motif in your own game. In case you missed my recent video about the Rousseau Gambit, which is one of the best openings for black against the white's first move pawn e4, you may click over there and check this out right now. And if you want to follow the proven roadmap for improvement at chess up to the expert level, then you may attend my free masterclass by clicking the link over there. Have a great rest of the day, and I'll talk to you soon.